morning, Knights, and welcome to the Westmount Highlights. It's the week of June 9th, 2020. This will be our last episode of the Highlights for this school year, and we're dedicating this episode to the Black Lives Matter movement and to all the peaceful protesters who are fighting for change. We stand in solidarity with our Black community. It's part of our human community. This moment is important, and we're all witnessing something that feels very different. It feels like change, and it's about time. So, on today's episode, I'm handing over the mic to Dr. Jafrali, a teacher and a leader who is a constant advocate for change and for human rights, not only in our school, but in our community at large. She's going to speak with one of our very bright and very outspoken students, Moad Al-Jouj. So let's get them on the horn.
Hi, Moad.
Hi, Miss J.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I was just saying to Moad, it's been so long since I've actually seen you.
Yeah.
How are you doing? How are you coping? I know, no lunchtime for us.
Yeah.
How's
boring.
things? It's different. It's definitely different.
Is.
Okay. So Moad and I are going to talk about the protests that have been recently happening across the world. I actually saw footage, Moad, in Denmark, Finland, all over for Syria. Yeah. Power to the people. About another death of an African-American man named George Floyd on May 25th, 2020 in Minnesota, in Minneapolis. And so this is not the first time we've heard about it, right, Moad?
No, definitely is not.
Definitely is not. I think before we start, for our Westmount viewers, shout out to the Westmount Knights, we're going to start with what Moad and I think is the difference between protesting, boycotting, and looting, because I don't think people know the difference. So for you, Moad, what do you think it is? What is protesting?
Protesting is more like when you stand up for what you believe in.
Mm-hmm.
Most protesting is usually like peaceful, like it's not like a fight back kind of thing. It's just more like you stand and you yell like what you believe in, like you're trying to like let the government hear you. While boycotting is usually when you boycott a store or a certain product to make that company like feel it, like they know it's like boycotting, so they lose money. And
the
then
economic buyback.
Yeah. And then looting is not even a form of protesting. It's just when they steal stuff.
Yeah, and when they destroy.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. I think people need to understand that protesting takes place in many forms.
Yeah.
I know you and I are marchers, and what that means is that we go out on the street and we march and we protest with our placards, which are those signs.
Mm-hmm.
And boycotting is also a form of protesting, when, like Moad said, you decide that you're no longer going to buy from someplace. So if we all decided we weren't going to buy McDonald's, we would boycott it. But what do you think other people can do, Moad, to show protest? Like maybe they're not like you and I and they want to go out in the streets and, you know.
There's like, you can sign petitions to show support. There's a lot of petitions going on right now. There's one thing that I really thought of and I thought it was a good idea. Like what Gandhi did when he closed down the streets and basically like just destroyed the economy and like, where like they all held hands and locked the street. Like I thought that was such a good idea. We could do that.
Right, like human chains, so to speak. And we've done that before at Westmount. We've made chains around the school, and when you and I were fighting against, and still fighting against Bill 21.
Definitely.
And so there's a lot of things you can do on social media now too. I've seen a lot of posts and reposts. I've seen people talk about it. I think talking is really important. I think that I'm asking questions. I think it's really important to ask questions. And I think being silent, how do you feel when people are not saying anything?
Because that depends. Because that kind of gets me. Like if it's someone that I would usually see and like I know they like use African American culture a lot, like they use the wording, they use the style, they listen to the music and like they embody it and like kind of run circles around it and like use it. But then when it comes to like Black Lives Matter, they want to say a word about it, kind of like annoys me. Like at least like show support to the people like that you take some things from, or like you use their culture for yourself.
Right. I think also one thing that people don't understand is this difference between Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter. So
Oh, I hate that. Oh, Miss,
what's
I
your
saw
thoughts on All Lives Matter?
I saw this girl talk about it, and I feel like she did such a good like situational problem for it, a metaphor. So I was like, let's say like your house is burning, right? And then the fire, what's it called? The police,
Spreads or the
yeah,
fire
the
people?
police come and the fire department come to like get rid of the fire in your house. And I come, I'm your neighbor. I'm like, why don't you go see my house? You can go check for it. But my house is not on fire. I just want you to check on it. It's not on fire. I just want you to check on it. My house matters, you know? But your house
Yeah.
is on fire. It's the one that needs help.
Yeah.
But like, I want you to check my house. It's not on fire or anything. I just want you to check it because it matters too.
Yeah.
And I saw like that makes so much sense. Like, why would you say Black Lives Matter does not say that no one who is not black matters? It just right now they're fighting for their lives because they're the ones who need to do it. No one else.
Right. I also saw another post where this young girl was holding a placard and she said, if all lives matter, then why do you keep taking mine?
That's
So it's really important that of course we both love humans, but love humans means love all humans, right? And if one person is not feeling that humanity and compassion, then all lives matter doesn't really make sense, right? And that includes, and we both recognize that not everybody is bad, right? We both believe
yeah,
that there are people who are both good and bad. We have it in us.
yeah.
So it's really important to talk about that. So Moad has a few questions for me now because I actually went to the protest on Sunday, the first protest that we had. And okay, I'm interested to see what Moad is going to ask me.
Okay. So one of my questions is because I saw a lot of it on social media, but I wasn't sure. So a lot of people said that it wasn't a peaceful protest.
Okay, so I can tell you first and foremost, your teacher went out there with full mask and I had a face shield and it was fine. I went there at, what time did I go? I went there about right at the beginning at 4:00. Everything was fine. Everybody was keeping their distance. Everybody was respectful. It was hard to social distance, but I was at the back. People were respectful. Even the cops were very respectful. And, you know, like I said, there's good and bad in everybody. So it was very peaceful. People marched. It wasn't until we got to the end, because it was between 4 and 6.
Yeah.
So when we got to the 6:00 mark, you could feel the energy change and people weren't there with the right intentions. So the people who were there from the beginning, we were there with the right intentions, right? But as we left, you could see the energy was changing and the marches was changing and people were going into that looting mode. That's what you and I talked about, the looting mode, where they were destroying property. And there are some arguments that people say protesting is looting because you're angry. But at the same time, I think looting takes away from the protest. But I also understand it. I know that it's important that we know that, of course, we know statistically there is about 42 Black people per 1 million who are killed by the police, which is a very horrific number. And it's also happening here in Canada. We know recently in Toronto, a young girl lost her life, 15 years old. And that's a situation that's unclear at the moment. So I think that this is not an American problem. It's not a Canadian problem. It's a worldwide problem.
Yeah.
And it's really hurtful, to be honest, because, you know, we're at Westmount where we tend to believe for the most part that we're a loving Purple Heart community. And when I walk outside that door, it's a little bit scary, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit scary. And I know you're coming from another country that also has those type of similar issues. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Okay, so I'm basically I'm from Palestine, which is right now like with in a conflict with another country named called Israel. Pretty sure most of you guys heard about it. But when I was there was a lot of racism between the two communities. So
Mm-hmm.
like, I couldn't talk to Jewish kids. They couldn't talk to me. There was a lot of like bombings going on where like they would throw bombs at each other. There was moments where I was at my grandma's house and I would see her getting beat by soldiers.
Mm.
But I was always in that family where I knew I wanted to like make it better and I wanted
Mm-hmm.
peace. I didn't want one person to leave the country. I wanted like where we can all live together peacefully and just be a peaceful community. And my parents did too. So they created a school for Arabs and Jews to go together
Mm.
and learn
Wow.
hand by hand. So I grew up learning Jewish, Hebrew. I learned up learning the Jewish culture. I know how to read and write Hebrew. I
Wow.
learned the Torah, and the same thing went for the Jewish kids. They learned Arabic culture. They learned the
And
Quran.
Quran. Mm-hmm.
Like we basically lived together in school, and that community right there was a very peaceful community where we worked together, and we affected the neighborhood we were in, and it was like a very nice school. I loved it.
Wow, that's really amazing, actually. That's a
Yeah.
really good initiative. Do you think we could do something like that? Like, what would it take, Moad, to do something similar in Canada and the US to see this type of understanding between people of African descent? So I would be a person of African descent, the
Mhm.
diaspora, and people who simply are acting out of ignorance, and some are acting out of hatred. But what would it take for us to have that kind of exchange of experience? What do you think?
Understanding,
Mm-hmm.
like the other side, understanding where you guys are coming from. Like I feel police. It's very easy to become a police officer now. It's like
Mm-hmm.
you go to the academy and then you just right after it you go and become an officer and like that badge for some officers feels like it's like they have like power over you. It's like lately police hasn't been protecting the people as much as it
Mm-hmm.
has been hurting them, and like there's like a negative attitude towards the police. Like no one
Mm-hmm.
wants to ask the police for help. Everyone's just like, no, we don't involve the cops, you don't like them,
Mm-hmm.
because like people don't see it as a positive thing, which it should be. The police should be something that protects all of us.
Right.
Depending on like your skin color, or where you came from, or your religion, or your culture, you see the police differently, which I feel like needs to change. And the police, like the entire way the police is run, it should be like reformed. It should be changed.
Right.
It was built on like supporting the white male or like help putting the minority communities down, and it's been doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So if it reforms, if it changes, it would be better for everyone, including the police, because then there's less hatred between all the communities.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a good part. Like, I think a lot of cultural understanding is important,
Mhm.
and we have to start somewhere. So one thing before we finish, there was a statement from Premier Francois Legault that there is no systematic racism here in Quebec. What are your thoughts about that?
I have to be nice, right?
Yes.
Okay. I feel like there's racism everywhere. It's not I feel it. I know there's racism everywhere. There's
Mm-hmm.
racism in Westmount. There's racism all over Montreal. There's racism in Quebec. But the degree of it, I feel like there's way less racism in Canada as there is in America, but it's still present here. There's still issues with Indigenous minorities in Alberta, like the
Mm.
new law that was passed in Alberta, allowing them to kick Indigenous people out of their homes
Mm-hmm.
for the pipeline, or like the Bill 21 that's happening in Quebec here, not allowing people to wear their religious or cultural wears because it makes other people uncomfortable, and by others, the white people uncomfortable.
Right.
So there is racism here. There is racism everywhere. It's not like it's just something that is only in America and it stops as soon as you leave the borders or like leave the country.
Mm-hmm.
Everywhere.
I definitely have to agree with that. I think the new form of racism is denying the existence of racism
Yeah.
and not confronting it head on. And I think hopefully, we continue to work at creating bridges and that we can walk over them and maybe have that school that your parents started on a larger scale. I think you brought up something that's really important because we're in the month of June. June 21st is Indigenous Peoples Day of Canada, where we recognize Indigenous culture. I think we need to do more than recognize. I
Definitely.
think it's important to also speak about the oppressions of other people. So while African Americans, Afro Canadians, and Black people worldwide are in duress, heartbroken, and traumatized at this time, we also can see that this is happening in Palestine, in Syria, in Myanmar,
Yeah.
and right here in Canada with our Indigenous communities all across this country, and the treatment and literally the conditions that they're living in.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's important that you don't have to choose an oppression. Like, you can stand for it all, because at the end of the day, we all bleed red.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important, that message, that we both understand that your oppression is not greater than mine and my oppression is not greater than yours. It's the fact that we are oppressed. That's the problem.
Yeah, definitely.
Any last words?
I miss you.
I miss you too.
This is going to like the Westmount students, right? And the teachers.
Yes.
Bye, guys. I'm not coming back to school next year. I'm graduating, so have a good life.
Westmount 2020. Gratitude.
Bye.
Bye, Moad. Always a
Bye,
pleasure
Miss
to
J.
see you. Bye.
That's it for us this week. Thanks again to Dr. Jafrali and Moad for adding their voices to the conversation. Stay tuned to this channel, since we'll be adding more content throughout June and into July. The highlights will be back next year. So until then, be well.